hello everyone, and thank you for joining us today for this conference at the occasion of the the World Environment Day, which we celebrated last Saturday. So my name is Mariana, for those who don't know me yet. So I'm the manager for corporate social responsibility, and I'm glad to welcome today Mimi from Alvéole, which is our partner since we started the beekeeping adventure back in 2014. So we are very pleased that we welcome our beehive back to the campus. It is located on our rooftop on the Pavillon Monk. So I hope that you will be able soon to visit our beehive on the rooftop. And also stay tuned at the end of the conference because we will vote for the name of our beehive. So each vote is very important and it's fun. So we'll have then time for questions, but feel free if you have questions during the conference to chat it into the Zoom box, and I will ask to Mimi and she will be able to answer your question in French or in English. So feel free to ask in any of the language that you feel the more comfy with. So I will leave Mimi to introduce herself, and present the beehive. So enjoy the conference.
Thank you, Mariana. So as she said, my name is Mimi. I'm a second-year beekeeper at Alvéole. I'm not actually your beekeeper for your hive. I'm just helping out with the workshop for today, but your beekeeper, her name is Sandrine, and she's fantastic. So I've also been studying bees for a couple of years now. So they're my passion. Like I've even got my own hive at home, and I've got little pollinator hotels at home as well. And this year with Alvéole, I'm heading the project with L'Accueil Bonneau. If any of you guys have heard about that, it's where we help people reintegrate into society. So we help them like with social skills, and we teach them this through beekeeping. And it's a really beautiful project. And at the end, we sell their honey. Well, they sell their honey themselves, and I think in specific supermarkets and little markets as well. So it's a really beautiful project, and I love it. So yeah, and as Mariana said, if you guys have any questions, if you want to ask them in French, I can answer them in French as well. So please feel free. We're going to do the Discover the World of Bees today, where we talk about all pollinators. So it's a lot of information I'm going to throw at you. So if at any point in the presentation you guys have questions, please feel free to stop me and ask them if there's something you didn't understand or you want me to go back. No problem at all. So let me share my screen so that you guys can see. And there we go. So discover the world of bees. So she is a builder, a caregiver, a forager, and she pushes herself to the max every day. And she does all of this without harming any other species in the neighborhood. Instead, she gives life to the world around us. Are you guys able to see my screen? Okay, good, just checking. And here in the city, she gives life to the neighborhood. There's a lot of things that we already know about honeybees. We know that they provide a lot of things for us. They provide wax, they provide honey, and we know that there's some type of connection between bees visiting flowers and the growth of the fruits and vegetables. But bees probably seep into your life more than you think about it. And it could be from the polish that you put on your boots to make them waterproof, the products you put in your hair, the lip balm that you carry around with you. They are all around us. And on that subject, let's talk a little bit more about bees. So, did you know that in North America alone, we have over 4,000 different types of bees, and they're all incredible. So here in this picture, we're going to talk about different types of pollinators. Some of these aren't actually bees, and I'll tell you a little bit more about them. So some are bright green. This is a sweat bee, and some of them will come all in this metallic green color. And sometimes when I'm out in the hives and it's a really hot day and I'm all sweaty, what will happen is these bees will come land on me and they will lick my sweat. They need the salt for their diet. So that's actually what they do. They're mining bees, which means that they make their nests in the ground. And this is why it's important that we not use pesticides, because the bees that make their nests in the ground, they're the ones who are the most affected because the pesticides leach into the ground with the rainwater and it destroys their nests. When we garden, we rip up the ground and we destroy their nests as well. But they're super beautiful. So keep your eyes out for these ones. They're everywhere in Quebec. This is a mason bee. These are the bees that I have in my little pollinator hotels. So they're called mason bees because they use masonry products, so like dirt, to make their nests. So they'll often do this in the holes in trees or in like your cabano in the backyard. If there's little holes, they'll plug it up and they'll lay their nest there. They're super efficient pollinators because they're so fuzzy. So they get covered in pollen when they go see all the flowers. And they're actually more efficient than honeybees at pollinating, if you can believe that. They're super cute and fuzzy. This is a pale miner bee. She is tiny, but tiny. If you really sit around your yard and you try and spot bees, it's really hard to see her. She's also a mining bee, so she makes her nest in the ground. This actually isn't a bee. This is a parasitic, but what it does is it mimics a bee so that it can benefit from other bees. It lays its nest inside of where bees will lay their nests, and those bees are born and they feed off of the other bees. So the eggs of that one, like a bumblebee, will go off. But they are also good pollinators, but it is not a bee. So this is actually my favorite bee. This is a leafcutter bee. It's called a megachile, and eventually my goal in life is to have my own house for bees of leafcutters. They are the cutest thing I have ever seen. I'll show you a video of them later, of them hatching. They wrap their bees in leaves. So they cut leaves and they make these little cocoons. And when they hatch from it, they are adorable. Let me go to the next one. So yeah, we've got all sorts of pollinators around Canada, and if you just keep your eyes open for them, you can see them. They may be small, but they are amazing and they make a huge impact in our life. We're gonna take a look at honeybees as our guide because that's what we specialize in, but all pollinators are important. So of all of these different types of bees that coexist around us, we're going to focus on only one that lives in a social colony of thousands and transforms nectar into the liquid gold that we call honey. So other bees do make honey, but not on the same scale as honeybees. So this is our honeybee. So humans have been fascinated with honeybees for thousands of years. And there's this saying that the bee's life is like a magic well. The more you draw from it, the more it fills with water. And I couldn't agree with this statement more. I've been working with bees for 2 years and I feel like I haven't even scratched the surface. Every day I learn something new about bees and they are just fascinating creatures. So at Alvéole, one of the reasons we install hives on rooftops in the city is to share this inspiring world of bees with as many people as possible, which is one of the reasons we're doing this workshop. So for the time we have together, we'll take a break at the end to ask any questions. But before that, we're going to do a little something special at the end. But let's keep going. Oops. So let's go back to the very beginning of the relationship between honeybees and humans. So back to about 5000 BCE in ancient Egyptian times. So the ancient Egyptians were some of the first beekeepers. Before that, there was something called honey hunters, where kind of like cavemen, I guess you could call it, would go and hunt for honey. But this was the most sophisticated, the ancient Egyptians were the one who started sophisticated beekeeping, and they kept bees. So if you take a look at this picture, you can see these long tubes, and there's a man standing in front of it, and you can't see, but he's holding a stick. So they would keep the bees in these long tubes, and they would use a stick to go and harvest the honey on the edges, because bees always put their resources on the outside and they put the babies in the middle. So that's how they would do it. And it's really interesting. I'll show you a photo later where there are still some people who use the same method. And I'm just fascinated by this. And another thing to note about the ancient Egyptians is when we started discovering some of the pharaoh's tombs, we found these enormous jars next to the pharaoh's sarcophagi. We're like, oh, it must have been filled with jewels or something like this. And they were able to analyze these jars, and they found out that there was honey that once was in it, and it was actually still good. So what they were able to scrape off was still good, even though it had crystallized. Honey never expires. So I found that really interesting as well. But it was so valued by them that they would try to bring it with them into the afterlife. And That's just amazing to me. They incorporated it into many different parts of their society and took advantage of its like antibacterial properties. So a lot of their medicines had different types of honey or wax in it, all the products from the hive, and their cosmetics, most important. So yeah, it's pretty amazing that all of these years later, we still use hive products in most of the same way. Although like our techniques have changed a lot, but the relationship between humans and bees has stayed the same. So let's flash forward to 1622, and this is when the honeybees first arrived in North America. So honeybees, a lot like other plants and animal species, were brought to North America from Europe, and it was specifically on the Jamestown ships that arrived in Virginia. And if you think about it, if it weren't for the bees, a lot of the trees and crops, kind of like apples, watermelon, blueberries, to name a few, they would never be pollinated. So it's because of the bees that we can have all of these things. So although the way that we use the honey and the wax has remained pretty consistent since ancient times, beekeepers have changed the way that they work, and different cultures will use different things in different ways. In the wild, this is where we would typically find a beehive. So in a tree, in a crack in a tree, in a crevice, in a cave, or in rocks. In urban areas, if we do find natural beehives, like sometimes it will be in someone's shed in the back or in the wall of a house, something like that. But in nature, we usually find them in trees really high up. So this is what I was telling you about. In Ethiopia, they still use war hives. So these ones are the ones that they used in ancient Egyptian times, but they put them high up in the trees so that bears can't get them or other scavengers can't find them. I find that so amazing. So it was a lot like the hieroglyph, and they'll use a ladder to go up there and take the honey out in this a very similar way with a hive tool instead of with a stick. Sorry, my slides are taking a little while to change. So in the Middle Ages in Europe, beekeepers used something called skeps to capture bees. So what they would do is if you look at these baskets, they open from the bottom. And if ever they found a swarm, they were able to catch the swarm with it. So they would hang it underneath, and if they could just shake the branch and the bees would just tumble in. It's a really efficient way of catching them. And then they would close it and the bees would start building inside of it. The only sad thing about this type of hive is that once they were ready to harvest the honey, they would just smash it, which in the end would kill all of the bees, which we don't do that anymore. Bees are so precious that we don't do that, but that's how they used to do it then. And in Quebec, it's actually illegal to have any type of hive that doesn't have movable frames. So legally we can't do anything other than movable frames. So if you take a look, these are the types of frames that we have in your hive on your roof and what everyone in Quebec will have. I'm not sure about the rest of Canada, to be honest. I've never looked at that law, but we have this is called a Langstroth hive. It was created a long time ago, and they have something incorporated called a bee space. So if you look at the photo where the beekeeper is holding the frame on the ends, underneath there's something called a bee space, and it's about 6 to 9 millimeters, so that when we put the frames in, we won't squish the bees. So although like when you see someone putting the frame in, it looks like we're really cramming it in there and we're hurting the bees, but there's enough space between everything that there's no way that we can hurt the bees. Occasionally we might squish one or two, but this is the safest way that we found to do beekeeping in terms of for beekeepers. But yeah, let me continue. The next photo is what your hive will look like. Your hive, I believe it's, well, actually, no, you started in 2014. You might not have the different color boxes. We'll see when Sandrine brings them to you, but this is what your beehive will look like. So when it starts out, if you look at the bottom of the hive, you can see a couple little bees, the one on the left in the front. This is the entrance of the hive. And if you go have lunch with the bees, it's really important to remember that you never stand in front of the entrance of the hive, because they take that as a type of, they're worried it might be an aggression. So what they'll do is they'll release something called the alarm pheromone, and then the bees are on alert and they might attack. We always approach the hives from behind, even us as beekeepers, we always come from behind. but this is what yours will look like. It starts off as one box, and we keep the queen and the babies in the bottom box. And throughout the summer, your hive is going to grow, and you're going to, right now it's maybe at around 10,000 bees, and it could go up to 30,000, 50,000 bees by the end of summer. So what we'll do is we'll add more boxes on top, and every box on top of the bottom one will become honey. The queen and the babies will always stay in the bottom, but your hive could go up to 3 or 4 boxes depending on how strong your colony is. It's amazing. All right. Let's talk about this. So there's a huge misconception that this is a beehive. Even in movies, I don't know if you guys have seen My Girl from a long time ago, but everyone thinks that these are bees. This is actually a wasp's nest. So bees will never create the outside of their hive. They will always create their hive inside of a crevice. So inside of a tree, inside of a cave, and then they make the comb inside of there. These wasps' nests, they create the outside with like papery material. And we'll talk about the differences between bees and wasps, but I just want to make sure that you guys understand that this is not a bee's nest, this is a wasp's nest. And they're much more aggressive. They evolved from a similar ancestor like some 120 million years ago, but the bees have a lot of differences now. So let's take a look at the difference between them side by side. So as you can see on the right, this is a wasp. On the left is a bee. The wasp has really, really bright colors, and it's very sleek. So very little hair on it, where the bee has more golden brown colors and is really, really fuzzy. The abdomen of the wasp is much smaller than the bee. Another really important difference between these two is their diet. So a wasp is a meat eater, where a bee is a flower feeder. So bees are vegetarian. They only eat nectar and pollen and water, of course. But the main difference, why, like whenever you're outside having a picnic and a wasp will come and be aggressive towards you, they can actually bite into your lunch and digest it, where bees can't because they eat meat. If you're eating meat, obviously. They're more interested in our food than bees are. Another huge difference is that wasps can sting multiple times. So their stinger is sleek. And so they can sting many times, and they're super aggressive about it. It encourages their behavior. Where bees have a barbed stinger. So when they sting you, their stinger gets stuck in your skin because our skin's quite thick. And then what happens is their abdomen rips off and the stinger stays stuck in your skin. So the honeybees will die soon after stinging you. So they don't want to die. So they try to warn you before, and they'll show you aggressive behavior. If there's anything threatening, then they feel that they need to protect their hive. They'll warn you first, and if still nothing, then they sting. They don't want to die. But yeah, so the huge difference between bees and wasps. This is what I was talking to you guys here. This is a pollinator hotel, a bee hotel. They're slightly different because they're made for solitary bees. So the honeybees themselves are a huge social colony, and they live together and they work together. Where solitary bees, not social bees, will do everything on their own. They'll lay their eggs and then leave, and they don't come back. They'll build their nests in the ground, leave the babies, and not come back. But they all live harmoniously in the city. And if you ever want to get one of these, there's plenty of them and in plant shops everywhere, and I'm assuming everywhere in Canada, but I know in Quebec there are some. So let's talk more about different types of pollinators. So the two main ones that we see here in Canada are mason bees and leafcutter bees. So the one on the top is a mason bee, is the one I was telling you is really, really fluffy and builds its nest in walls with masonry products. The one on the bottom is a leafcutter. So you can see she has really, really thick mandibles because she cuts leaves. She cuts these like semicircles out of leaves, and she carries it back and she makes cocoons out of it. It's super cute. And so everything that they do is for the survival of their offspring. So they collect all the food, they leave the babies, and then they hope for the best for them. But they don't come check on them like what honeybees do. Honeybees spend a lot of energy and time preparing for their offspring. So this is what the inside of a nest looks like. So again, for the top is still for the mason bee, and the bottom is for the leafcutter bee. So you can see there's like different different little sections in there where she lays her egg in the pollen that she leaves for the food for the baby. So baby bees eat pollen, adult bees eat nectar or honey. So here you can see that. And on the bottom is the little cocoons for the leafcutter bees. So they have these little pods that they get born out of it. I'm going to show you a video of it because it's honestly the cutest thing I've ever seen. Now, let me see if it will play for you. It looks blank. Ah, okay, there. So this is a leaf cutter being born, hatching out of its little pod. And they're so fluffy and they're so cute. This is probably why they're my favorite. They're adorable. Anyways, I could let you watch this over and over. I'll pause it. I think you get the point. They're so cute. Oops, play it again. Okay, there we go. So, sorry, my screen won't go to the next one. Okay, there we go. So as I was saying, the solitary lives of most of our native pollinators are a huge contrast to what our honeybee goes through, and it's a very social life. So really a honeybee, if you think about it, is like a city starting out. It starts small and then it gets bigger. And then as the summer ends, it goes back down to a smaller population so that they can survive the winter. But like I was saying, at the height of summer, your hive could go up to 50,000 bees. Right now, they're around 10,000 at one box. Where this cycle, we're adding another box, so the population is gonna explode very soon. They're just gonna multiply and keep going. So yeah, eventually, like in this one, you can see in the hive on the left-hand side, there's like a little metal thing between the two boxes. Excuse me. This is called a queen excluder. So what it is, it looks like it has like grills on it, and it's small enough that all of the worker bees can pass through it. But the queen has such a big abdomen because she's filled with eggs that she can't pass through. So that helps us make sure that the queen stays in the bottom box and she only lays eggs there. Because what we don't want is the queen going up into the honey supers on the next box up and laying eggs in there, and then we end up having eggs in the honey. It doesn't sound very appetizing. But in the next one over, you can see this one's already reached 3 boxes. Some might reach 4. It depends on the area. Usually like in Laval or on the North Shore, not on the South Shore, they can go up pretty high because there's so many resources for the bees. All right. So the bees come and go from the entrance, which runs along the bottom of the hive. This is their main entrance. Some hives have a second entrance at the top, and it helps with their aeration. But if you ever go have lunch near your hive on the Pavillon Monk, you'll be able to see their flight pattern. So if you just sit and you watch them for a while, you'll see like 4 or 5 bees come out at once and all go in the same direction. And they're going to find a very specific resource that their sister told them about. So in front of my hive here at home, if I stand in a certain spot, I stand in their flight path and they hit me right in the head. So I have to make sure not to stand there. It's really interesting to watch. So yeah, the first day, your bees will probably be everywhere because they're trying to locate themselves. They geolocate first, but after 24 hours, you'll start to see those patterns. It's really cool to watch. From the outside, everything looks really, really calm. But on the inside, there's so many bees, thousands, and they spend their days working hard and they carry out a multitude of different tasks. And they're all individual, but they're all very connected. And everyone works together to come to a certain goal. And one of the things I find most inspiring about bees is their capacity for teamwork. So I'd like to introduce you to the star of the beehive. And it's not Alex, this is one of our co-founders, but it's the little friend on his nose. So this is a worker bee, and she's one of thousands in her colony. And this bee here is just about over 20-25 days. She's just started to fly. So she's actually going towards the end of her life. She lives about 30 to 40 days. So usually about 20 days in, she'll become a forager, and that's when she starts to leave the hive, and she'll go get resources until she dies, basically. So yeah, she's just become a forager. Let's go see. So our worker bee, so she lives with a ton of her sisters, a few brothers, and one very devoted mother. So this worker bee makes up 90 to 95% of our hive. And she gets her name, the worker bee, because she carries out all the work in the hive. Like most of the work, I should say. The queen does a lot too. Whoops. The next one is a drone. And this is the male bee. I think they're adorable with their huge eyes and they're super fuzzy. What's great about them is that they can't sting. So if you ever do a Meet Your Bees workshop, your beekeeper can take them and put them on you. They can't hurt you. You can just pet them and they're adorable. But his job, he only has one job, is to mate with the virgin queen from another hive. But what's very sad about that is once he mates with a virgin queen, he dies. So mid-air, he will. It's a very explosive reproduction process. So it explodes and then he falls to the ground. But it's a very important task. He has to pass on his genetics. And other than that, another very sad thing is that usually around fall, all of the female workers kick the males out. So we arrive at the hives and they're all dead in front of the hive because they can't survive on their own. They don't collect any nectar, they don't collect pollen. Most of the time they just hang out in the hive and they eat the resources. So the girls are like, no, we're getting ready for winter. We can't lose all of our resources to you. And they kick them out. It's a little bit sad. The males have it a little hard. Which brings us to our last one. And this is the queen. Oops. There we go. And she is the one and only. So per hive, we can only have one queen. If we have more than one, there's actually a battle to the death and it can be pretty gruesome. I've found some hives like where the queen survived a battle and she can have like her wings ripped off and she looks pretty beat up. It's pretty intense. But her only job is to lay eggs. And she can lay about 1,500 to 2,000 eggs per day. So usually at the height of summer when it's the warmest, she can lay about 2,000 eggs per day. And all day long, all she does is walk around the hive, looking into the cells, seeing if there's an empty one, and she lays an egg. She has a court of usually about 10 to 15 bees that follow her around all day, and they take care of all her needs. They clean her, they feed her, they make sure she has everything that she needs. So here in this photo, you can actually see the court bees around her taking care of her. They also pass on her pheromones to make sure that the other workers know that she's there and that there's a queen present and that they don't need to build a new queen. So sometimes queens have these amazing colors. Usually we'll see like 3 different, very, very specific bees. There's the Italian bees and they are this beautiful golden, like reddish color. They're so beautiful. We have the black queens. I have a black queen and she's amazing. Sometimes they can be a little bit aggressive though, but mine is not. And then we have tiger queens. So they have like these little black stripes on them or spots. Those ones, they're very rare. So whenever I see one, I take a photo. We'll see what your queen looks like. And I was just thinking, you guys should have a vote to name your queen. Like Cleopatra and Beyonce, they're very, very popular names. So think about it if you want to name your queen. But yeah, so the queen usually will, when she's first born and she's a virgin queen, she will go on her mating flight. It's called a nuptial flight. And she will mate from about 10 to 35 males. In the city, it's usually less because there aren't as many beehives as out in like in rural areas, I suppose. And yeah, so the more sperm that she can collect, the longer her life will be. She can live about 2 to 3 years, but the longest that I've heard is a queen bee living about 8 years and not failing. So she continued to lay eggs all that time. So let's continue. Okay, back to our worker bee. So as I was saying, the worker bee does all of these jobs in the hive, and it actually depends on her age. So when she's first born, our worker bee looks like this. So she's a little egg in the bottom of the cell, and they're super, super hard to see, but that's my job as a beekeeper. I have to find these every time because if I find this egg, this size, I know that my queen is there. If I can't find eggs, then maybe I lost my queen. So like all of her sisters, it takes her about 21 days to develop from an egg to a fully developed bee and to emerge out of her cell. And as soon as she emerges, she gets right to work. The bees construct their honeycomb cells just big enough to fit one full-grown bee. And when it's laid, this is what it looks like. Oh, is this my video? No, okay, I have a video soon to show you guys. So our worker bee slowly developed from an egg into a larva. So the first, like the little grain of rice, eventually she eats and she develops into a little larva. And usually after 9 days, she gets capped on top, and that's when she starts her metamorphosis into a full-grown bee. It's quite fascinating to see. I'll show you guys a video later. So yeah, 9th or 10th day she becomes, and after 21 days, she is born. And this is what it looks like. This is a bee hatching out of her cell. So what they'll do is they'll go to the top and they'll chew along the edge of their cell, and they chew their way out of the wax and they just emerge. And it's the cutest thing to watch. Whenever I have a frame with a bee being born on it, I will just sit there and watch them. Sometimes I even help them because it can take up to 6 hours to hatch out of a cell. It's a lot of work for them. So as soon as she crawled out, she gets right to work. She starts cleaning her cell that she was in so that it's ready for the queen to lay another egg. And then, like all of her sisters, she gets right to work. I'm going to show you guys a video from National Geographic. I'm going to put myself on mute so that you guys can hear it better, but let me just get it up. So yeah, so this is a special camera where they were able to film the bees developing from an egg all the way to an adult. It's a really cool thing to see, and you'll even see something called a varroa mite, which is something that the bees unfortunately have to deal with. It's a parasite that eats the fatty materials on a bee, and they prefer the male bees because they're bigger. But you'll see these little red things crawling around, and we can talk about that later. Okay, I'm going to put myself on mute so that you can hear it better. Sorry, decided to play it again for some reason. So let me get to the next one. Were you guys able to see the little varroa mites that were on it, the little red ones? Yeah, they're gross. They're horrible little creatures. Okay, so over the course of the next 20 to 25 days, our worker bee is going to master a bunch of different tasks. And so the first 20 days, she's a house bee, which means that she lives inside the hive. And then the last 20 days of her life, she's a forager, and that's when she goes outside and she collects all the resources for the hive. So each worker will pretty much do every single job there is in the hive. And it usually depends on their age. They'll progress through certain things, but also if ever something happens and there's a lack of bees and they need more foragers, other bees will start to learn sooner and they'll go out and do it. So it's not always dependent on their age. It will depend on what the hive needs as well. So yeah, so one of the first things that she'll start to do in the first 2 weeks of her life is she'll spend most of it inside, and she'll be taking care of the brood, and the brood are the baby bees. Let me show you. So yeah, she'll clean out her cell first and make sure there's no moldy pollen in it, and then she starts taking care of the baby bees. So this is when she becomes a nurse bee, and she'll visit one egg. So from the egg stage all the way until a grown adult, she will visit that bee 140 times, feeding it. So at about 2 days old, she'll start to develop her mandibular glands on the side of her head, and this is where she produces royal jelly. So if you look in the bottom of the cells, some of them look like there's like this milky white liquid. That's royal jelly. So all baby bees, the first 3 days get royal jelly, and then as they progress, they mix it with pollen, but the queen always gets fed royal jelly. And she starts feeding the older larva first because she's not used to feeding it and she could potentially drown the eggs. So she feeds the older ones first, and then as she gets better at it, she'll feed the younger babies. And then at about 12 days old, she'll develop her wax glands. So on her stomach, she's got 4 wax glands, and she only produces it for about 5 days. And this is when she becomes an architect. So she starts building the cells inside of the hive. So she passes it to her mouth, and then they chew it and they form it in the hexagons that we see in the honeycomb. So here you can see that. And then after that, after becoming an architect, she'll start, it's called trophallaxis. And it's when the forager bees come back full of nectar and they pass the nectar on to the house bees. And then the house bees go and put it in the cells and they thicken it with their enzymes from their stomach. So they slowly take all of the water out of the nectar and transform it into honey. And then once it's honey, it gets capped. After that, honeybees will become ventilators. And so they always need to make sure that the hive is at exactly 35 degrees, not more, not less. If it's too hot, they ventilate the air out. And if it's too cold, they'll go inside and they vibrate their muscles so that it stays nice and warm. I think I've got another video to show you guys. We're slowly running out of time. This is called the waggle dance. It's actually only about a minute long. Let me, whoops. I'll fast forward it to the 1 minute mark so you guys can see. It's really cute to see. And I'll mute myself. It's so cute to watch. Sometimes you'll pull the frame out and they're doing it. Whoops, sorry about that. I'm gonna skip through to show you guys the last few slides and so that you guys can do a little boat. Give me a second to get there. Yeah, so once she has her waggle dance down, she's basically ready to become a forager with her tongue, and she has these corbicula on her back leg that helps her collect pollen. And I'll show you in the next photo what it looks like. So from underneath, she's collected this pollen on her legs, and that's what they feed the babies. And it's really nice to see a pollen frame because every different flower has a different type of pollen. So we can see blue pollen, red pollen, yellow and orange are very popular. There's white. I love to see the bees coming in with this. And yeah, so she's responsible for pollinating most of our crops, and she does all of this without harming any other insects. So they're amazing little creatures. Next one. And that's it. So, oh, can you guys hear me? I think my earphones might have lost their...
No, we can hear you, Mimi, it's okay.
Okay, perfect.
Please go on.
Sorry about that. So yeah, all of this to say that agriculture, we kind of lost our connection to food. And since we don't see our food being produced, pollinators kind of become like this collateral damage. They go from flower to flower, especially in like agricultural areas. They're responsible for pollinating 1/3 of our food. And we put pesticides on it, and then these bees die from it and they bring it back to the hive, and then they poison the hives, and we're losing about 30% of our bees every year. So it's a very important thing, as we as consumers can put our vote towards things by buying things that are bio and that don't use pesticides, and putting your vote towards that would really help the bees. Planting pollinator friendly flowers will help them as well. There's so many things that we can do. They're so important for us. And honestly, that's about my presentation. So I was going to let Mariana present a little something here, and then we have time for questions after.
Thank you very much, Mimi. We have great comments on the chat box that we can definitely feel your passion. So thank you very much for that. And it is so interesting. And now it's time to launch the polling, the vote for our beehive name. Not yet the queen, but perhaps later on for the queen. Can you see? Okay. We'll just wait a little bit for everyone to be able to vote. It's going very fast. Oh, nice. Okay, now I think that we can reveal the result. Our beehive will be the bee kind. Isn't that so cute? Thank you very much, everyone, for your vote. And if you have any question for Mimi now, please feel free to unmute or to ask in the chat. Or if not, you're also free to go to the rest of the day. And thank you very much for your time with us. It was so interesting.
Yes. Thank you.
Hello. I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
So I bought a little like a bee hotel, like you have in the back.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering what's the best place to install it? Like what's the goal?
So when I first bought it, I did all this research on it, and they said so long as it's south facing or southeast facing, that's where the sun comes up. Honestly, I don't have anywhere to put it like that. So mine is actually facing east, and I have so many visitors in my hotels, and my neighbor has one up on the second floor and his is facing south, and he gets just as many. I haven't tried any of the other directions, but I've heard that having it closer to the ground is better, but like I said, my neighbor has one on the second floor and it's working fine. So I think you can test it out in a bunch of different spots. They'll find it.
Okay, cool. And should they be like closer to plants, ideally?
Ideally, yes. If you have any type of pollinator plants, yes, ideally. But it honestly, like I said, my neighbor, he doesn't have too many plants up there and he still gets them. So yeah.
Thanks.
My pleasure. Sophie, you have your hand up.
Oui, merci Mimi pour la présentation. Très passionnée, c'est super important. Il y a quelques années, à l'ancien bureau, on a perdu notre colonie où on s'est fait voler. Je me demandais comment est-ce qu'on rebâtit une colonie d'abeilles? C'est comment on trouve une nouvelle reine pour en rebâtir une?
Bon, ça, c'est les abeilles qui vont le faire eux-mêmes ou vous pouvez acheter une nouvelle reine. Aussitôt que tu as un œuf en bas de 3 jours, les abeilles, les ouvrières, ils vont créer une nouvelle reine. C'est comme une pinotte. Attends, je peux vous montrer une photo si j'arrête de partager.
Parce que ça a l'air d'être comme une autre espèce. N'importe quelle abeille ne peut pas devenir, comme être élue la reine.
N'importe quelle femelle peut devenir une reine aussitôt qu'elle est en bas de 3 jours. Parce qu'une fois qu'elle devient une larve, c'est trop tard. Ils ont déjà commencé à la nourrir de la pollen. Et il faut absolument que ça soit juste du gelé royal. Donc, toute sa vie, elle mange juste du gelé royal. Ça l'aide à développer ses organes reproductifs, en fait. Et elle devient plus gros. C'est vite, ça prend juste 19 jours comparé aux autres abeilles. Mais aussitôt que tu as un cadre avec des œufs frais, ils vont la bâtir. Mais vous avez dit qu'il y a quelqu'un qui a volé votre
quand votre équipe est venue pour faire la récolte, il manquait le tiroir du bas.
Ah, OK, bon.
Ouais.
Interesting.
Oui.
J'ai jamais entendu ça. OK, c'est triste. Mais normalement, Alvéole, on garantit la colonie. Donc, si jamais quelque chose arrive, on va la remplacer.
OK. Ouais. Donc, c'est ça. Donc, comme tu dis, ils vont eux-mêmes comme refaire une colonie.
Oui, exact. Ou, disons, parce que des fois, s'il y a trop de vierges, comme ils vont toujours bâtir plus qu'une. Ça va pas juste être une cellule royale, ils vont faire comme une vingtaine. Et ce qui arrive, c'est que s'ils sont toutes nées environ le même temps, ça se peut qu'une vierge part pour se faire féconder et un autre part après. Si une revient avant l'autre, elle va partir comme en essaimage. Donc, ça, c'est pas le fun. Donc, Des fois, on veut pas avoir un essaimage, donc on va introduire une reine. On les achète et on les apporte. Après 10 jours, tout va bien. Ouais.
Merci.
Bienvenue.
We have
Any
another
other
question. Yes,
Yeah.
in the chat we have Susanna who's asking, what are the best types of flowers to plant to help?
Oh, great question. I have so many resources for this. I can email it to Mariana and she can send it to you worst case. But these don't see the same colors as us. So if you have native flowers, that's honestly the best thing you can do for the indigenous pollinators in your neighborhood. For honeybees, they see blue and purple best. So they really show a big preference for those. If you have dandelions or white clover, those ones are really great resources for bees. Instead of having grass in my backyard, I put clover. I don't cut it. There's always flowers. But mostly blue and purplish flowers. They also like yellow. They don't see red. They see red as black. So try not to avoid it, but they just won't see it the same. But I have a whole bunch of resources. I'll send it to Mariana so she can send it to you as well.
Thank you.
And I actually have a follow-up question.
Yes.
Are all bee hotels created equal, or is there like okay?
Yeah. So if you look in I've got 3 of them here. This one is made of like a softwood, kind of like a pine, and they love it. It has been the favorite for 3 years. This one here, I think it comes from Costco actually. They've only touched it this year. And then I have this one with like a metal roof that I thought they would love. They haven't touched it at all. So what I think is the softer woods, but it will also depend on your area, I think. But no, they're not all the same at all. Yeah. Softwoods, that if it's too solid, they won't be able to dig into it at all. That's my observation so far. Any other questions?
I would have a question. Now, I'm allergic to insect bites, so I have an EpiPen and so on. But I still want, to introduce my children to how important bees are, and I believe in the cause. And I would like to get a bee hotel, but obviously I'm a bit wary about the, So what's the danger level of, having a bee colony close for somebody who's, let's say, would be allergic?
That's a really good question. The thing is once you have bee colonies close to you, it will also start attracting things like wasps. Okay. And that's what scares me when people who are allergic to them want them, because they're much more aggressive. I would tell you, if there was no chance of having wasps, I would tell you go for it. It depends on your behavior. The way you move around bees is what they find threatening. I have never been stung by any of my bees, and I've never been stung by the ones that are here. Honestly, if you have a bee hotel, they don't stick around. They lay their eggs and they leave. And then at one point you'll find a little hole where the masonry was, and the bee was hatched and you missed it. And you're like, oh, okay. But it's really in your behavior. I don't want to say 100% that you won't get stung, but just be careful because it will attract wasps. And if you're allergic to all insects, are you also allergic to wasps?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Maybe if worst case, what you could do is if you have a yard, place it at the furthest away from your house and with the entrance away from your yard. That way they're not going to be coming in. That would be my suggestion.
Perfect. Okay. And for the flowers, are wasps also are wasps also attracted to the flowers, or?
No, we do have a couple of wasps that are pollinators, but the majority are meat eaters, especially like the really big ones, like the yellow jackets. Those ones are not interested in flowers at all. They will actually come and eat my bees. They cut off their torso and then they take off with the torso. So the flowers, no interest. It's okay. Meat.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. Welcome.
Well, thank you very much, Mimi. I don't know if we have any other question, but I think that everybody agree to say that it was very fascinating to learn more about the bees, and you are definitely very, very passionate about the beekeeping. So that's wonderful, and it's a wonderful program that we have with Alvéole, and we are very glad to host our little bee on our rooftop. And I'm really looking forward to be able to organize activities with you all, to be able to see the beehive in activity. So thank you very much, everyone, and have a good weekend ahead. Bye-bye.